That's a weird look. Let's see if we can get that to be a little bit better. There we go. Hello, my name is Charlie Minato, and welcome to Halfwheel's Top 25 live show. Boy, that is it's a weird look. All right. To my right is Brooks Whittington. Brooks, how are you doing this morning or this now afternoon?
I'm doing wonderful. It is the afternoon. I'm doing wonderful.
All right. And I guess more to my left, although I'm not really sure which direction we're pointed, is Patrick Lagreid in Phoenix, Arizona. Patrick, how are you doing? It is still morning where you are.
Yeah, one more hour. I'm doing wonderful. Just really excited to see this process come to its culmination, and then probably take a nice long nap over the weekend. So, how about you guys?
No, I have to work on the consensus. So,
Oh, well.
yeah, no naps. Patrick, what are you smoking? Trying to smoke?
So,
right now?
I'm actually smoking the Oliva Serie V 135th anniversary, which is over there.
So Patrick's smoking the Oliva Serie 5
Maduro.
Yeah.
No, it's actually a Maduro. No, actually, I picked up some not that long ago. Was really excited about them when I saw them at the trade show, and have always considered the Oliva Serie V to be one of my real foundational cigars when I was getting into cigars. God, how many years it's been now. And certainly 135th anniversary is one we're celebrating, and it's a unique figurado, so I was excited about that. And generally been very impressed with it flavor-wise. I think it might need a little more time in the humidor.
All right, well, you should probably stop talking about that because we have a review upcoming, so I don't know who's doing it, but let's not give away the actual review there, Patrick.
I didn't say anything.
Said it needed a little bit more time.
There? Brooks, what are you smoking?
I have a 2020 Liga Privada Year of the Rat.
Cool. How's that
Very
going?
nice. Charlie,
It's not
what are
bad.
you smoking?
It's not bad.
It's not bad? All right.
Not bad.
I'm smoking the SBC 18, surrounded by champions, the
Oh, nice.
Halstani release. So anyway, if you want to tell us what you're smoking, maybe we'll put it up on the screen. Or maybe we won't. Depends on if I can figure out how to use that feature today. But this is the top 25. We're not going to chit-chat forever. So we're going to get started probably in a few minutes. But before we do, I think it makes sense, and I'm a big proponent of telling people how these lists come about. And so ours is, I would say, probably one of the more unique ones. And it starts with the idea that we are only looking at cigars that we reviewed throughout 2021. And the easiest way to sort of figure out what could end up on this list or what can't end up on this list is that it needs to score at least 91 points. So if it got below 91, then it's not going to be mentioned, at least as a top 25 finalist today. That's a number that we developed, basically just said, hey, look, we're going to look at the scores. This is 5 or 6 years ago at least, if not longer, and said, hey, we're going to rank the scores we do for the entire year. Whatever the 25th cigar is, if it's a 91 or a 90, then all of the 90, 91s, et cetera, whatever it was, would be considered. And it ended up being 91, and it's been that way every year since we started doing that, where you've needed to get a 91 to qualify, so that is the important score. It needs to be a cigar that was released either in the second half of 2020, so anything July or later, and there are some cigars that were released in late 2020 that make this list, or 2021. And you should also note that that means that some cigars that came out particularly in November and December of 2021, we have not reviewed yet, or we just got around to reviewing, like, say, the Supreme Leaf Bellicoso or Torpedo from Aganorsa. That cigar, which scored 93 points from Patrick a few days ago, is not on this list. It will be considered for next year's list, so tune in a year from now. In addition, we also do Redux reviews at Halfwheel. Those usually take place on a Monday. That's when we go back and review a cigar that's been aged to see if it's changed since the original review. Or in the case of like the cigar that Brooks smoking, the Liga Privada Year of the Rat, if a company decides to re-release a limited edition many years later, we'll oftentimes compare the original cigar, and so that I think the original Year of the Rat was in 2016, and then Drew Estate has decided to re-release it, and so we did a Redux review where we compared the two. Cigars that score 91 points in those reviews are not eligible. It needs to be a full review, and the big reason, there's two reasons why. The first is that we only want cigars to really have one shot at making the top 25, so in the case of, once again, this Year of the Rat that Brooks is smoking, it had a chance to make it in 2016 or whenever it was released originally. It shouldn't get two chances as far as we're concerned. And the second reason why is that the Redux reviews are only based off of one cigar, whereas the regular reviews are based off of three. So there's a pretty big difference there. I will point out that sometimes people re-release cigars and they change the blends, and as long as they change the blends and are explicit that they have changed the blends, then we do go ahead and consider those different cigars, but we're not going to get into that long discussion today. So once a cigar scores 91 points, we then will either, if we've got a box, we will acquire 3 more of them, or we'll take 3 out of the box and send them to, if let's say Brooks did the review, then we'll send one to Patrick in Arizona. I'll take one and smoke it and score it, and we'll also send one to Brian Burt, who apparently is smoking a Davidoff Diademus 50th anniversary right now. Brian Burt used to review cigars for us full time. He still helps out notably at the trade show, but he's also involved in the awards process, and because he's familiar with the half-wheel score sheet and we trust him, he's still part of our sort of tasting panel for this. And then we take all those scores and we tabulate them into a spreadsheet. Now, this is the 2018 spreadsheet. This is what it looked like at the end. And sorry, I'm trying to keep my cigar lit here. You will notice that there's just a whole bunch of numbers. So the way this actually works is this spreadsheet is basically blacked out throughout the year. And as the scores come in, I put them into the spreadsheet, but I can't see the parts in yellow. Those are blank. And you can see if you start at the top left-hand corner with that Hoyo Nicaragua, you'll see a whole bunch of numbers. The first 3 are from Brian, so the 52 is a reference to flavor, the 19 is construction, and the 10 is for balance. Each one of us will score it. You'll sometimes see some decimal points in there. That's because of the person who did the full review. Those are the average scores of 3 samples, and we will weight all 4 of our opinions equally, and then that gives us the average score, and then we simply just sort them by highest score to lowest score once all of the scores are turned in, and Brooks turned in his last score sheet last Tuesday. So we didn't know what the winner was until about a week and a half ago. And it's important to note here, we aren't ranking them, we are scoring them. So the big difference there is that it's not like we've sent Patrick 26 cigars and asked him to rank them 1 to 26. Instead, what we do is we send Patrick over the course of the year 26 cigars, and we ask him to score them. And so, you'll see a lot of scores on there that are identical, but then obviously when they get averaged out, they get averaged out. So that is the process. If you have more questions about the process or really any questions at all, feel free to put them on the screen, and we will maybe get to them. We're going to take a few questions probably at the end, but not too much. And since Michael has been waiting all year for this, I mean, it's been one hell of a 2021 if you've been waiting all year for this. We're going to go ahead and get started, I think, hopefully, with number 25. Number 25 is the Hoyo de Monterrey Primaveras. This is a Cuban cigar. It was a limited edition cigar. It was released this year, or in 2021, for the Chinese Zodiac calendar, the year of the ox. And this actually is the cigar that we let off yesterday's live show with because it was number 10 on our packaging awards. Cuban cigars, we oftentimes hear complaints during these shows about how Cuban cigars don't end up on this list. And the easy response is, if you go on Cuban cigar Facebook groups or forums or even read books about Cuban cigars, we've all heard that Cuban cigars tend to do better with some age. And because we are trying to focus on new cigars, it kind of runs counterintuitive to Cuban cigars making it onto this list. This was an example of a fresh Cuban cigar that did really well. And was quite enjoyable. Although, before I turn this over to Brooks, who I think is assisting me here, I will say that the bottom of this list, they're all obviously very good cigars. They all scored 91 points. But the sort of first 4 or 5 that we're going to go over today tend to be cigars where 3 of us really had great experiences with them and 1 of us did not. And I was the outlier here. I smoked the Primaveras, the one that I scored for the top 25, which was the first one that I smoked, and it did not want to burn properly. And so if my score was removed, it probably would have ranked a lot higher. That being said, I smoked one maybe 3 or 4 months ago, well after the one that I scored, and had a much better experience. So, inconsistency is sort of the problem here. But Brooks, you smoked the cigar and had a much better experience. You want to describe what it was like for the viewers?
Yeah, I mean, the look, as you said, it was a lot of, it was very approachable, which I loved in a younger Cuban. A lot of the newer releases, are hit and miss. But I certainly found that this one was very complex, and I had very few problems with construction on my 3 samples when I reviewed it. But I loved the look of it. I loved the feel of it, and it really had a really nice profile that I found extremely enjoyable, especially considering how large it is. It really kept my attention the entire time I was smoking it, which is not always the case with those larger cigars.
All right, Patrick, you still with us?
Yeah,
All right.
No, I'm here. I just was.
And now that
want to make sure I didn't
the-
step on anyone's toes. So, while a Cuban cigar kicked off this year's list, the number 24 cigar is one with the name of a Cuban brand, but isn't Cuban. Rather, it comes from General Cigar. It's made in Nicaragua and uses tobacco from Ecuador, Indonesia, Honduras, Mexico, and Nicaragua. That cigar is the Partagas Cortado Corona. This is a new line that was released. It was the first Partagas from General to use a Connecticut seed wrapper, and also the first to be made in Nicaragua at STG Esteli. It's aptly described as mellow to medium, as for me, it's a really nice, ideal morning cigar, or one when I just don't want a heavy profile or one that's got a lot of nicotine in it. It's creamy, nutty, but also fairly forthcoming with pepper, so don't get confused and think this is just a mild kind of, set it and forget it, background cigar. This actually does have a really nice profile. And the nice part about that for me was it never seemed to settle into any one profile for too long. It makes some really nice transitions, even in a fairly short 5.5-inch length. And, this cigar shares its name with a coffee drink. And as I understand it, which I don't drink a lot of these, a 1-to-1 mix of espresso and steamed milk. And I thought that was a really apt and fitting comparison for this cigar. I think it would go great with coffee and certainly is a nice way to start the day off. Brooks, I'm curious what you thought about this new line from Partagas.
Yeah, I loved it. I was really impressed with it's one of those new age Connecticut's. It's got a little bit of punch to it, but not enough to make it ineligible for me to smoke in the morning. And I didn't drink anything while I was any coffee, water. Don't drink anything other than water when you're reviewing. But when I was smoking this, I was thinking to myself, this would be perfect on a patio in the morning with a nice mocha or something like that. I mean, I'll have to try it. I look forward to trying it. But I think that it's a really great, lower strength, but still with a little bit of pepper, like you said, and just a really, really nice, nutty cigar. Yeah.
All right. Well, with that said, I'm going to kick Brooks off your screen.
Bye.
And we're going to move on to number 23. It is the St. Louis Rey Carenas Toro, and I'm a little confused. Hopefully it's showing up on the broadcast as working well. Let's go ahead and let me see if I can remove. Sorry?
It's on mine.
Oh, it got on yours? Sorry. My screen was a little screwed up there. Anyway, this is a really unique blend here. It's got it's got a Nicaraguan wrapper. It's made in Honduras, and it uses a Honduran broadleaf binder, which I feel fairly confident saying there's not another Honduran broadleaf binder on our list this year. I can't honestly think of another cigar off the top of my head that has a Honduran broadleaf binder, or really Honduran broadleaf at all. Obviously, broadleaf better known for its Connecticut varietal, and then also a little bit the stuff that's grown in Pennsylvania, but we are starting to see it grown in the Central and Latin American countries as people are trying to get more and more of it. And this was a cigar that I thought was super complex. I was certainly an outlier here. I liked the cigar a little bit more than the rest of our team did, but I thought it was an excellent cigar. The only weird part to me is, I don't know, Patrick, what your thoughts here is, when you say St. Louis Rey, I think I have no clue. Like, it's just a brand that's completely lost in Altadas USA's massive portfolio. Obviously the SLR Gen 2 or whatever is this like super dark, almost purple, broadleaf cigar. And then you've got this thing, which is medium full and super complex. It's a great cigar. I just hope it, doesn't just get missed because it's a St. Louis Ray and no one really knows what to think of St. Louis Ray.
Yeah, I mean, prior to the Carenas, if you handed me a St. Louis Ray or stopped me in a humidor and said, hey, what about this cigar? Asked me to sum it up. I honestly don't know what, if anything, I'd be able to tell you. And saying that, though, the Carenas reintroduced me to the brand, which is really nice, and did it with two things that I love. I mean, I generally do enjoy Nicaraguan tobacco, but I also, I think as people have maybe come to find out, I really enjoy good Honduran tobacco. And I think, as you alluded to, that Honduran broadleaf binder gave this cigar a interesting spin. And I was reading back on your notes, you had brought up oatmeal raisin cookies at one point, and I thought that was a really fitting description because you do have some sweetness, and it's not the heavier earth, and it's not quite terroir, but it's I thought it was a pretty apt description for one section of the cigar, and I certainly hadn't necessarily thought about that comparison, but I can see how that becomes a nice way to summarize it, and then the cigar can move from that starting flavor or that thought into other things. And I also was really impressed because you'd mentioned this as well. It's also just kind of a fun cigar to smoke. It's got a lot of evolutions, and it's just got a lot to offer. And I think what it reminded me of is that anytime you walk into a retail humidor or you're browsing online, you're going to walk by a lot of cigars. And I think it's a good reminder that there are cigars like this sitting on store shelves all over the country that really do have a lot to offer and are just sitting there waiting to give you a really good, enjoyable smoking experience if you give them a shot. And that's what was so impressive about the St. Louis Ray Carenas.
All right, I think we're ready for 22, Patrick.
We are. So that moves us to the number 22 spot. And, you might have seen the growing presence of cigar subscription programs in recent years, one of which is Pravada's Cigar Club. Out of that program's success, owner Brian DeCinde launched the Limited Cigar Association, a way to bring Pravada's releases to brick and mortar stores, particularly by way of these First Friday releases. In March, LCA retailers received the number 22 cigar, the Buena Ventura Trail Mix. It's made by Curavari, it wears the same band as other Buena Venturas, but it is a modified blend. And Pravada and the LCA wanted this cigar to showcase Curavari's blending capabilities. And so the blend uses some higher primings of the tobaccos from the regular lines, as well as some different tobaccos, and the result is quite impressive. When a cigar puts flavors or flavor suggestions in its name, I often find myself both on the lookout for them and also trying not to get led to what might not be there. And this was a cigar, though, that actually delivered on its name. There's campfire, cocoa, orange citrus, supporting flavors that remind me at times a bit of trail mix. But then there's more to it. The final third is incredibly meaty and peppery at times, but also then swoops in with dried apricots. So really impressive creation from Curavari and the LCA. And of note, this is the second LCA release to make our top 25 list. Last year, the Room 101 Death Bucket 2 was on our top 25. Charlie, I'm curious what you had to think about this one.
Yeah, this is another really good cigar from Curavari, which is a brand that I remember, 6 or 7 years ago, maybe even longer, at the trade show. Curavari seemed like it was about to be sort of the next big thing. People were constantly... It seemed like there was just this effort to go to the trade show and be like, okay, Illusione and Tatuaje did their things. They went from, brand new companies to these, really highly respected brands that also then started selling a noticeable amount of cigars. And people just seemed to be trying to find, like, what's the next thing, the next big one that I can get in on the ground floor of it. And Curavari, there was a moment in time when they seemed like they were going to be that. The problem with Curavari is they've got all these different lines, and most of them that I've smoked have been great. They don't really disclose much information, so you can't tell what the differences are supposed to be between the two of them. But this was another great cigar, and $10 isn't the most affordable cigar. But the other thing I would say about Curavari stuff in general, at least my impression of it, is that it typically tends to be pretty affordable for what you're getting. can't say I've had a lot of bad Curvaris, and I've certainly enjoyed the Buena Ventura, the core blend. This is, I believe, is a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, I've been a fan of Curvari, and I wish that we could communicate with them a little bit better so we could review more of their cigars, because it's just tough. It seems like they do a lot of stuff quietly, but the brand's still around all these years later and seems to be doing quite well, and obviously still making really, really good cigars.
Yes, indeed.
All right, on to number 21, the Oliva Serie V Milanio JR 50th anniversary. Now, this was an exclusive cigar released for JR Cigar, who is a retailer, a very large retailer. And they had 12 cigars released over the course of last year, all exclusive to them, by various manufacturers. And all of 12 of those, they actually put into a sampler, which we reviewed yesterday and made our list yesterday on packaging, number 7, if I recall correctly. And this was one of those. Now, this is actually the first non-box pressed Milanio that was released, and for the U.S. Thank you, Charlie. And I've never found the Milanios to be all that complex. They're very, very consistent, though, and it's one of those things where I love complex cigars, but every once in a while, or sometimes, I really want something that's consistent. I can pick this up and know exactly what I'm going to get, and this didn't disappoint in that regard. It had really good construction, and I really, really enjoyed it, and like I do most of the Milanios that I've smoked. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I did the review on this, and when I was reviewing it, I think I was trying to figure out just how different this was from a Milanio that you might find at your local shop. And what's particularly unique about this is there is a 6x50 box press in the regular production line. You can, if your local retailer carries that, you can go down and probably find it. So there's a debate about is the round version noticeably better? And I'm not really sure I could give you a great answer or a detailed answer, or if you're looking for this, then this is the one you want. But if you like that, then you want to go with the box press or the round. At least not without a few rounds of head-to-head smoking. And that is something I really do highly recommend people do, whether it's different Vitolas or, round versus box press. Smoke cigars side by side and see if you can pick up the difference. It's a great way just to go through an exercise of training and exposing your palate to, what may be slight differences. So, all that said, it did remind me that this is a really, really enjoyable blend. I said at the beginning, the Serie V is one of those. It was a really important foundational cigar for me, and it's one of those cigars that I think almost any cigar smoker should smoke to understand, a cigar that's been on the market for a long time, has had a tremendous amount of success, offers a certain profile, and then you can sort of build off of that. It's got earth and pepper, and I didn't necessarily think it was, as the most complex cigar, but I don't also know if I could really say anything was particularly missing from it.
Yeah, I feel like the. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, please. No, please.
I feel like that the Milanio and the Serie V and the Milanio, just the Serie V blend in general, but also the Milanio and the Milanio Maduro, they seem to always have this really, just this massive dark chocolate to me, and on the palate, and I feel like that it changes depending on the blend, but I feel like that's a core flavor: earth, dark chocolate, and to me, it's very enjoyable when it has that massive dark chocolate flavor.
Yeah, and like I said, I think then the question becomes, is this better than the 6x50 box press you can go down and get your local shop? I don't know. What I can tell you is that it's a really solid cigar. It's a nice addition to the Milanio to the portfolio. If you want to pay a little premium for it, knock yourself out. You're going to enjoy it. If you want to go down to your local shop, get the box press version, I'm sure you'll enjoy it just as much. Either way, a really nice cigar that celebrates JR's 50th anniversary. Congratulations to them. Making it 50 years in any business is impressive. So certainly a well-chosen cigar for that anniversary.
All right, so we're going to move on to number 20. We will do, we'll throw up the list after number 16, so you'll be able to see the 16 through 25, but we're not going to do it at the first 5. So number 20 is the Intemperance BA21 War. This is the Brazilian version of the Intemperance blend. There is also the EC, which is the Ecuadorian Connecticut, and then there's also Whiskey Rebellion, which I believe has a Habano wrapper, but I may be off on that. This is one of a cigar that comes from one of the most unique samplers. We just talked about a sampler at length there, and that is RoMa Craft's series of El Catador samplers. And RoMa Craft's been doing this since the early days of the company and has continued this tradition where they pick a specific vitola. So for 2021, it was a 4.5 by 60 short Gordo size, and they make all of their blends or almost all of their blends in that size. And what that usually means is that some of the cigars in these samplers are new cigars that they haven't otherwise sold, and some of them are usually ones that are actually available as regular production items. So for the El Catador de los Petit Gordos, which is a little oxymoronic as far as I'm concerned, there were 2 cigars in there that were regular production items, the RoMa Craft, the Cro-Magnon and the Aquitaine, and then there were 4 cigars, the 3 Intemperance as well as the Neanderthal C3, that were new cigars, and they put them all in these samplers, and we buy like 5 to 8 of these samplers depending on the year, and this one was great. This is a blend that certainly I think was, in the early days of the company, was my favorite RoMa Craft blend. I thought Cro-Magnon initially was a bit too strong for me. Maybe I've grown up, maybe it's tamed down a little bit. I now like Cro-Magnon, at least as much as I like the Brazilian Intemperance blend. Though I suspect the staff is maybe still on the Intemperance BA as being their favorite overall RoMa Craft blend. What's interesting, and I'm curious to know your thoughts, Brooks, here. I mentioned this in my review, and I still think this is true. I thought this was an excellent cigar. It's obviously in our top 25. But I didn't think it was a great representation of the blend, not because it was bad. It was very good. But I found the sweetness, which I think is sort of what helps separate the Intemperance BA line, particularly with that Brazilian Arapaca wrapper. I felt like the sweetness wasn't there as much as I normally find in the other vitolas. Did you have a similar experience?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say. Exactly that. It was that the larger, the thicker size of this one doesn't have as much sweetness as the smaller vitolas to me, and I prefer the smaller vitolas in this line specifically. I do absolutely love this blend. I always have since it was released. Cro-Magnon, as you said, has always been a little too strong for me to enjoy personally on a regular basis. And it was made that way. It's supposed to be that way. But for me, this was a great example of how a blend can change, just slightly, and it can make it into a significantly different cigar in terms of the profile just by changing the size. And some people will like this more than the smaller ones, and some people will like the smaller ring gauges, and some people will like the larger ones. But I'll tell you this, it's a damn good cigar, and that's really all that matters at this point.
All right, so with that out of the way, we're going to get to number 19, and that is the Ferritogo Elegancia. Now, Ferritogo, which earlier this week won New Company of the Year, an award we have not given out in many years, but there was enough new companies that we decided it was appropriate to do so this year. Ferritogo is a new company from Michael Herglatz and Brennan Scott. About a year ago, they announced that they had purchased the rights to the Nat Sherman cigar and pipe, as well as the accessories business from Altria, which was the owner of Nat Sherman, and they bought the rights to use the blends, the artwork, the names of the lines. The only thing they did not buy the rights to was Nat Sherman itself, and they decided to call the company Ferritogo, which is 2 words that appear on the Herglatz family crest. And when I started talking to Herglatz about this new company, which is sort of out of left field, although it makes sense now looking back on it. He had always said the plan was going to be they were going to release a Ferritogo cigar, and then they were going to start to bring back the old Nat Sherman lines, and they were going to bring the old Nat Sherman lines back using the same names, the same sizes, the same artwork, other than removing the parts where it said Nat Sherman, as well as the same factories and same blends. But they were going to do something all new to sort of introduce Ferritogo to the market. As it turned out, that's not what happened. For whatever reason, they ended up shipping a couple of the timeless lines first, and they also ended up doing not 1 but 2 Ferritogo cigars. So this is the Elegancia. It is made by Quesada. It has a shade wrapper, obviously, if it's not clear on your screen, on it, and it is a cigar that I will remember forever for its just absolute layers and layers of nutty flavors. It is very similar into that new age, not your father's Connecticut type of flavor where it's medium full to full in flavor, medium full in body. It's got a little bit more nicotine than your classic Monte Cristo white label is going to have, and it doesn't necessarily have the big black pepper and cedar notes that a lot of the classic Connecticut shade wrappers do, or cigars with Connecticut shade wrappers have on them. But it is an interesting cigar. If you like nuttiness, great. If you don't like nuttiness, I probably would not recommend smoking this because it's going to be overwhelming to you. I found it to be a little bit monotonous at times, Patrick. Certainly not as exciting as your experience with the other Ferritogo, the Generoso, but did you think the nuttiness was maybe got to the level where it was overwhelming to the point where it was boring, even if you do like that flavor profile?
I don't necessarily think I would agree with you there. It certainly is not just a common thread. I mean, it is the cigar plants its flag on the nutty slice of the flavor wheel pretty early on and doesn't really deviate from that too far. I don't necessarily know if I know what to call it monotonous. I mean, look, if you want something that's going to jump in and out of different flavors, this may not quite be up your alley, but it's certainly a good cigar. And Troy, I think you touched on it, just how different our experiences were with the Ferritogo releases, especially in light of the sequencing in my case. So I read and edited your review of this, but hadn't smoked the cigar before smoking the Generoso, and had such a starkly different experience that I almost couldn't believe that these cigars came from the same portfolio.
Well, in fairness, you were nicotine sick out of your mind, so.
Seriously, it was one of the. If we give an award for most potent cigar that I smoked this year, that may have. I think that would probably be it.
If we're going to do that award,
that's not a bad idea.
It needs to just be the most the cigar that almost killed Patrick, and not the cigar that almost. I don't want to have to smoke the contenders for all of them.
But I did share a lot of the same thoughts you did once I smoked the Elegancia. And again, if anything, I was probably just more relieved it didn't have me curled up on my bed, waiting for the world to stop spinning so quickly. I guess it does plant its flag in nuttiness, but then I don't think it's not as singular as somebody may take that to mean. There is some different flavors that evolve out of that, and the intensity of the flavor I thought was also really quite impressive. It's not overpowering, but it rarely takes a puff off. So again, really impressive work. I think I've talked to about smoking cigars side by side comparison. This is certainly a pair that I mean I'm recommending doing that with because they are vastly different profiles. But certainly the Elegancia was a really impressive creation from the Ferritogo team.
This band and logo is just friggin' amazing. I loved it when I first saw it, and I just really, really nice. So, moving on to number 18 is the Las Calaveras Edition Limitada 2021 LC50. This is a very popular series from Crown Heads, sorry. And it basically was released in 2014, and it's meant, according to them, to commemorate the people who have died the year before. And they released different versions every year and have since 2014. Typically 3 to 4 different vitolas. And I found this one to be very, very good. It's something that, to me, it was very complex, but also very well balanced, very harmonious in terms of how the flavors fit together. And it was just a very, very good cigar that comes from a very, very good line of cigars that have been very enjoyable in the past. Now, 2014, the 2014 version was legendary for any number of reasons, and it made number 4 on our list that year, I think. But it was amazing. This is not quite as good, but it's definitely one of the best of the year. Patrick, what do you think?
Yeah, and I'm going to just apologize really quick if there's any audio issues. We're taking a look at them right now.
Seems like we've fixed them, Patrick.
Okay, awesome. Commenters, let us know if you're not hearing it. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned the 2014 release, and literally this has become a line that when it comes out every year, I really look forward to it because of that high bar set. God, it's been 8 years now. I don't know if anyone can give an accurate ranking of the years. At least I don't think I can, based at least off the top of my head. This was certainly a good one, and in particular, I thought the Ecuadorian Sumatra Oscuro wrapper was a decent reason why. It's a tobacco that's generally quite rich in flavor, and I certainly thought that was a real nice aspect and a key aspect of the profile. It's a tobacco that responds well to fermentation, and I'd really be interested to know what sort of process the leaf went through to get to the point where it was ready. I find that just fascinating. And as Charlie noted in his review, he thought it was one of the milder Las Calaveras releases. But again,
yes, and I agree with that.
Yeah, but what's interesting that you can say it's one of the milder ones, but that doesn't mean it doesn't still have a ton to offer. And I think that was what was really impressive about this.
Well, I think it also depends on how it's all relative, obviously.
Sure.
This is not a mild cigar by any means. It's a solid medium, at least to me. But it's certainly milder than a lot of the other versions that have been released. The interesting thing, and I was going to ask you a question, Patrick, real quick. I always, every year that these come out, I always try the Robusto when I, not necessarily first, because depending on what we're reviewing, but I definitely try to Robusto because of how good that 2014 was, just to be able to compare to it. Do you do the same?
I will say I don't think I do it intentionally. I am, when the sampler comes out, that's usually the first thing I go pick one of those up and try and smoke through the line. That's a great idea. Like I said, I don't think I do. I would say that I probably gravitate to a Robusto size or a Corona Gorda more just instinctively. So I've probably done that more times than I am giving myself credit for. But
I haven't tried the Petite Lancero yet, but I think that's going to be next on my list.
Yeah, and I will say just before we move on, if you're watching this and you haven't seen the original review of this cigar, do so, and you'll see every Las Calaveras next to each other. And it's one of my favorite collection shots, given the similarity in style, but differences in color of the bands from year to year. And I have to say, I really got to give Charlie and Brooks a lot of credit for that, for making that photo happen. It literally is one of my favorite photos that we produce. Every year. It's not easy. It takes 30 minutes or so to get them all pulled out of the humidor. And
it took a little bit longer than that this year.
Okay,
they keeps getting more and more time consuming. Not quite Tatuaje Monster Series, but definitely time consuming.
Yeah, and I mean
not that far away from that.
There's a ladder involved. It's really
not for this one, but it's coming.
almost.
All right, Patrick.
So now with that, we head to the number 17 spot. And if you want to get the attention of the proverbial cigar geek, just say the words Cameroon and Lancero, and you've probably done the job. And for good reasons. There's been some highly regarded Cameroon wrapped Lanceros in the history of cigars. Early 2021 gave us another one by way of JRE Tobacco Company's Aladino Cameroon Elegante. This cigar is notable because it uses Honduran-grown Cameroon, which is still fairly rare compared to the African-grown variety. And as we've noted before, it's the soil that gives tobacco its flavor. So this does have a unique profile, but one that works very well with the Honduran Corojo binder and filler that gets paired with. It might not be as vibrant in some ways as the African-grown Cameroon, but it does offer some pretty impressive flavors on its own and seemingly as part of the overall blend. Charlie, this is your review, so I know you have some thoughts on it, but I also know that you have a bit more hands-on experience with JRE's Cameroon tobacco in the process that sort of led to this cigar, right? And you are muted, I believe.
Okay. Apparently, I was muted for all of that, so we're going to try this again. Anyway, I was at the JRE Farms 4 years ago, and I was at the Farms in the Factory, and Julio Roa showed us the tobacco that he was working on, which was this Cameroon seed that he was growing at the farms, on a plot of land off to the side, and he was trying to work on it. And the tobacco, Cameroon is one of my favorite, if not my favorite wrapper. It does not work most of the time, but when it does, I find it to deliver some of the most unique flavors. But it's got its issues. It's super fragile, so smoking it right now when it's cold outside in a lot of places is not great. It also is the most expensive, or amongst the most expensive wrappers that you can get. It's tough to get, and it also is ugly. It's not as pretty as most other wrappers, and wrapper tobacco is largely chosen for its aesthetics. And this was prettier than what the African Cameroon looks like, in my opinion. And it didn't necessarily have all of the same flavors, but it had enough of them. What I find super unique about this whole project is the cigar has become quite popular, particularly amongst JRE's lines, and I think a lot of people don't know that they've done this before. When the Aroa family owned Camacho before they sold it to Davidoff, they came out with a Camacho with a Honduran-grown Cameroon wrapper on it, or Cameroon seed wrapper. I take it didn't do very well because it's no longer around. But the Aladino Cameroon line's been great. It's got some Cameroon, some Honduran influences. It certainly is. I like it more. I'm curious to know, Patrick, your thoughts, if you like it more than the Ecuadorian Cameroon that we see, sort of the go-to alternative Cameroon.
That's a good question. I have to admit, I don't remember the last Ecuadorian Cameroon cigar I smoked. So, I don't know if I can give you a great answer on that. I definitely enjoyed this. I mean, I think what was interesting, and I don't know if you quite touched on this, but as they were growing it, the Aroas and I think Justo had to sort of learn not to be so delicate or I mean, it had to let the tobacco do its thing. So in much along the ways that it's grown in Africa, from what I understand.
Yeah, I mean, the Mirafels have described to me how they grow, or how a lot of the farmers that grow Cameroon for them grow it. It is a completely different process from start to finish than the tobacco we see grown in Nicaragua or Honduras, normally speaking. But yeah, it's interesting. We've seen CLE also, which is Christian Aroa, Julio's son and Justo's brother. His company had a CLE release this past year with a Cameroon wrapper grown in Honduras. It'll be curious to see. The Aroas say they say what everyone says. They don't sell their wrapper to anyone else. It'll be curious to see if we get any more Honduran Cameroon outside of CLE and JRE and I guess Asylum. Or if somebody else tries to grow it. Although, Julio's sort of the pioneer of experimenting in Honduras.
Yeah, and I think it's certainly, if nothing less, it shows that the Cameroon tobacco can work and certainly has place in a broader segment of cigars than maybe what we had been acclimated to for one reason or another. And anytime you see that's certainly exciting for me in my palate.
Just a note here, this is one of the only cigars I purchased in the last 3 years personally. I loved it so much I went out and bought some. And we've got 25,000 cigars or something here in the office. And I love this cigar so much I went and bought some because it was so good. And I loved it. I loved it. Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right.
What do you think? Time to move on to number 16?
I definitely think it's time to move on to number 16.
Let's do it. Well, with a name like La Bomba Warhead, the first thing that's likely to come to mind is strength. And you wouldn't be wrong with that. But especially if you smoke the last 6 installments of the line. But the 7th installment was really about more than just strength. It showed some restraint, actually. And by doing that, that cleared the way for some creaminess, coffee, woodiness, and other flavors to come through. It's tough for a cigar like this, I think, to reach the level of complexity that's generally needed to get on this list. But the La Bomba Warhead 7 did just that. So kudos to the team that blended this cigar. As I noted when I did the review, it was knocking on the door of really great, impressive complexity for much of the smoking time. So, again, really impressive in that regard. I also have to give a nod to the design team on this one. This is one of those cigars I don't think it maybe gets quite the packaging recognition sometimes that it might deserve. It's, again, the 7th in the line. The bands are really unique with that.
Patrick, I'm going to interrupt you. Your audio appears, at least on our end, to be going out again. Can we have you try to plug in a microphone, plug out the microphone, plug it back in?
Yeah, we can do that. I don't know if that's...
All right, I'm going to mute Patrick so that way we don't have to listen to the static. And I I will tell you that this cigar was super, super strong. Patrick is right. It has the complexity. It's not just strength, but I do think this is the strongest cigar on this list by a very, very wide margin. It's a cigar I'm curious to see if Patrick's audio is fixed. Patrick, we're going to do a little test here.
You better there? No? Yep, maybe.
Yeah, the static is gone, so there's that. I'm also curious to see if you are going to redux this in maybe 3 or 4 years and what that looks like. I'm always interested about cigars that are this strong out of the gate to see. They kind of go one of 3 ways. Either they stay super strong for a long time, they mellow out and get a lot more complex and you can taste a lot more things, or they mellow out too much and they just fall off a cliff. It's I don't know if there's much science as to what it's going to be, but I'll be curious to see if you do in fact do a redux where we're at. Do you have any ideas as to what you think might happen?
I don't. I've sort of given up the trying to predict it thing. I certainly think it could be some mellowing. And the risk is that when you say mellowing, that it may take all the other good parts out as well. That's kind of hard to say, And thankfully, I didn't think this was a knock you on your back strong cigar, so it's not like I'm necessarily waiting for that to go away. I hope that whatever about this blend allows some of the other more minor aspects of it, that those are able to hold up and preserve in a year, 2 years, 3 years. So be really interesting to see, though, and only one way to find out, right?
That is true.
All right. So we've got the first 10 done. We've thrown them up on the screen for those who may have missed something or just want to take a good look at them. Remember, if you want to ask a question about the process or any of the cigars or of us in general,
predict number 1, perhaps.
Feel free to do it in the comments. We will try to get to some of them as best we can. So again, go ahead and do that. While we got a quick little pause here, Brooks, we talked about strong cigars a moment ago, and that was certainly what made the La Bomba Warzone 7 stand out. But looking at that first 10 list, is there a cigar that stands out to you for one reason or another? Or
you mean other than that one?
Yeah.
Definitely the War was one of the stronger ones on that list so far. It certainly wasn't near as bad as the Warhead was, obviously. But I find that a lot of RoMa Craft stuff it's got that underlying strength to it, even if it's it can be a little sneaky sometimes. And not in every blend, but certainly in a lot of them. Charlie, what do you think?
The 601 was the strongest by a mile. I don't really know. Looking at, I don't think any. I mean, I guess it'd probably be the Melanio if anything, but the rest of these I would say are distinctly medium full at best in terms of nicotine. I think that the 601 La Bomba is the 10 out of 10 strength-wise.
And not even close, in my opinion. All right, moving on to number 15. There's not many series that have multiple, entrants onto our list since 2012 when we started. But the La Polina Goldie has had 4 now, different versions, different Vitolas that have made our list, our top 25 list at various points. This is the La Polina Goldie. Laguito number 1. It's a 7x38 Lancero, not a classic Lancero. Cuban Lancero is a 7.5x38, but this is a 7x38, and it harkens back to the first release in 2014, right? Yep, 2014, which was the Laguito number 2, a 6x38 Petite Lancero. Like that one, I found this to be creamy, complex, just extremely, extremely complex on the palate and on the retrohale. I've always loved the La Polina Goldies blend in smaller ring gauges. I think the larger ones tend to lose that richness that the blend has. But this one is definitely one of the best ones in the series as far as I'm concerned. What do you think, Charlie? Do you think it loses that wonderful richness in the larger ones, or?
I mean, I'm not a great person to ask about the Goldie blend because I feel like my opinions about the Goldies have oftentimes been the opposite of the population at large. I was not as impressed with the original Goldie Lagreid number 2 as everybody else was. I thought it was a good cigar. I didn't think it was like a mind-blowingly excellent cigar like so many people, including you, did. And they've been, I think our reviews have shown they've been pretty good, but there's been some misses. I definitely liked this one more than the recent spat of larger ring gauge Goldies. I'm curious to know your review. I remember reading it back in the day on Smoking Stogie. I think it was Smoking Stogie back at that point still.
A long time ago.
It's been a while. But I'm curious to know if the banana sweetness, which was really the thing that you seemed to be enamored by with that original Goldie, if you found that to be as did you find it on this cigar, and was it, how close was it to being what it was on the original one, given this is the same ring gauge, just an inch longer? No,
it wasn't near as prevalent. I believe I tasted a little bit of it, but it wasn't close to as prevalent as the first one. And if it was, I probably would have scored it a little bit higher, but certainly it had quite a bit of sweetness to it, and I really wish that it had, because that would have been a really good topping on the top of that. But no, it did not, sadly.
All right, well, now we can move on.
Did
to number
you taste
14.
any banana sweetness in the first one?
In the first one, banana sweetness to me. Oh, we might have another issue here. The banana sweetness thing is an interesting one. I remember talking to some, I forget which Scotch brand they were ambassador for, but they said that banana is a flavor that when people are like, oh, I taste something and it's kind of sweet, that they literally just throw out, because banana, like at its core, I guess, is basically a texture flavor. It has very little unique flavors. And then there's the whole debate with the Cavendish banana and the fact that we're, particularly in America, eating the wrong banana. But I don't say that the Goldie's really been a banana sweetness thing. I occasionally find that flavor, but not here. And with that discussion of bananas, I think we're going to move on to number 14.
Yeah, so let's do that. While the cigar industry, including the company behind the number 14 cigar, keeps moving towards larger ring gauges, every so often a smaller Vitola comes along and shows that it can offer a really impressive experience. That's the case with the Asylum 13 20-minute toms. The 4x48 Rothschild delivers a lot of cigar for its size and its $6 MSRP. Now, I didn't find the 20-minute part of the name to be quite accurate. It was more like 55 minutes or so for me. But look, I wasn't complaining about spending some more time with this cigar. It's a Honduran Corojo Puro. As I've said before, when done right, Honduran tobacco can be really, really fantastic, and that was the case here. Full, rich flavor, earthy terroir, clean pepper, dry, hearty woods. Those are the things that really stood out to me as pushing this cigar onto the list. I'm not sure it's better than the Asylum 33, which I also gave a 92 back in 2015 and finished number 13 on our list that year. But I think this blend is a real testament that Honduran Puros might be one of the most overlooked cigars around. Brooks, Asylum is certainly known for doing big cigars. They just did a 9x90. But I'm curious what you thought about this rather small offering from them.
For the longest time, I was not necessarily a big fan of Honduran tobacco, but Asylum is one of those companies that has really changed my mind. They seem to just do it right. Whatever it is, they're doing it correctly. This was an excellent smoke, very, very rich on the palate. Surprisingly rich to me when I was smoking it, especially for such a short cigar. It lasted a little longer than, obviously, 20 minutes, at least for me. But the good thing about it was the construction was so good that it did not get hot at the end, which a lot of these smaller ring gauges sometimes do. I was able to smoke it down pretty quick, pretty low, and the flavor was spot on the entire time. I was really impressed with this. If you want a smaller smoke that just packs the flavor in, this is definitely one that you should try.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
All right, sorry. Going on to number 13 is the Davidoff Limited Edition 2022 Year of the Tiger. Now, there's a lot to talk about with this one. It's it's part of Davidoff's extremely popular Zodiac series, which is basically the cigars are named and labeled and have packaging taking the animals from the Chinese zodiac. There are 12 of those, and this is the 11th one in the series, so there's only one left in the original series anyway. But there's there's a whole bunch of different things about this one specifically. A lot of the ones before this one for Davidoff have been, they're all, generally within the same size and look very, very similar for the most part. This one is very, very different. It's the first one to use a Connecticut wrapper. It's the first one in the series to be a torpedo, and it's definitely the shortest of the series. And the interesting thing about it is how they made the wrapper. So what happened was they took a Connecticut wrapper, and they took darker veins from darker tobacco. And you know what tobacco they took it from? Specifically?
I don't think they
Nobody they told us. And they put it on top of the Connecticut wrapper just randomly. And then they pressed those together for 48 hours. And then after that time, they ripped off the, very carefully, I imagine, ripped off the veins, leaving the stripes behind. Now, the packaging actually won one of our awards. I forget which one yesterday.
It was tied for first.
Tied for first yesterday. I should remember that. It was excellent. The packaging was amazing in every aspect. But what I found about this cigar was that it was, to me, a very different flavor profile than the vast majority of the Davidoffs that I've smoked. It was very, very, very complex to me, and I loved looking at it while I was smoking it. It just looks amazing when you're smoking it, and it had this wonderful, amazing sweetness on it on the retrohale that I just really loved. Now, Charlie, you doing the thing?
I am.
Yeah, Charlie. You didn't seem to think that the profile was that much different than a lot of the white labels you've smoked. Is that correct?
Yeah, I thought that this was it's certainly, as Brooks mentioned, it's shorter. These have had a habit of being very large cigars. Maybe not Asylum large, but large for Davidoff certainly, and also expensive. And this is a $42 petite Bellicoso essentially. But I thought it was pretty similar to a lot of like Davidoff classic blends. I've smoked 3 of these maybe at this point. The first one maybe not so much paying attention to it, but I thought it was a good cigar. I didn't seem to be as exhilarated by it as you were, Brooks. But it's not a bad cigar. I mean, obviously it's number 13 on it. It's on our top 25. It's right at the halfway point of it. It's a very good cigar, but maybe not. I mean, there have been some of these blends that in the Zodiac series that really, really stand out to me as being pretty different from what you normally get across Davidoff's portfolio. Certainly the regular production portfolio. This one was much more aligned with what I think of when I think of the core Davidoff lines. I will say that I suspect that this is not going to go away even once they get to the 12 out of 12. I certainly think they're probably going to do Year of the Dragon twice at a minimum, because the first one was not really part of the formal series. But the other part here is this is a massive revenue generator for Davidoff and its stores. Obviously, the cigars, they made almost 200,000 of them this year. They sell out very quickly. And at these high price points, I imagine they're going to keep doing them because, it's a lot of revenue that they would be saying goodbye to. But I'm certainly curious to see, where the series goes. Do they just re-release Year of the Snake and do a Redux version, or do we get a reimagined Year of the Snake in a completely different size or maybe a different blend? But we'll have to wait and find out. Or if you've got a time machine and you're willing to let us borrow it, please leave a comment below and we will get in contact with you.
Yeah, as many of these as they make and as quickly and easily as they seem to sell, it's like printing money for Davidoff. So I can't imagine them just getting rid of it.
Can I throw one thing in before we move on, guys?
You
I'm just
absolutely can.
Curious, and certainly for the commenters and who are watching this, we talked about this, or we talked about the packaging a lot yesterday, and certainly well deserved. One thing that sort of stood out to me, and I don't think I heard either of you guys mention it, and I don't remember seeing it anywhere. Does this Vitola remind you a bit of a tiger's tooth?
It did not until we were doing the walkthrough yesterday, and you mentioned that maybe it could be. Obviously, the cigar is straight, so, and I also, again, despite my fascination with tigers, have not recently looked at a tiger's tooth.
But I just thought that, tigers are really as well known for their teeth as anything, and I thought that was sort of maybe a hidden little nod to that for this release. That, I don't think of what, horse's teeth or ox's teeth or things like that, but again, the more I look at it, I just wonder if that's sort of maybe, I don't call it an Easter egg, but just something that was really just maybe a nice little touch to the whole thing. But
It does seem odd that it's a very short torpedo when all the other ones were so large. So
yeah. Anyway, something maybe somebody at Davidoff can chime in and see if we found out the hidden secret of it. Moving on to number 12. This also comes from the Davidoff portfolio, but it is from the Avo brand. This is the Synchro Caribe Toro. Now, when I heard that this cigar was called Caribe, I immediately thought, okay, what kind of flavors this name might suggest? Fruity, light, spicy, ocean breezes, maybe something else. Thankfully, it was really the best of those, namely creamy, complex, sweet, a little bit fruity at times, which I enjoyed, but really downright enjoyable. The Synchro series is an interesting one. It's designed with a concept of tobacco synchronization, which aims to incorporate the diversity and complexity of various tobaccos, but more importantly, their compatibility. And I definitely think that the Synchro Caribe did that in the blend. It's certainly a blend that I've gotten excited about. Brooks, this is your review, so I'll turn over to you. I mean, why do you think it did so well?
Balance is basically why I think it did so well. Synchronization is, as you mentioned, is what they were going for, and I think they nailed it. The balance on this cigar was phenomenal. It was, of course, it had flavors, and it was complex, but in terms of just everything working together so well was one of the main reasons that I really love this cigar. And I believe it's one of the best Synchro blends that I've tasted, and I'm really looking forward to if they do more of them, just to see what else they can do. But this is it was just an amazingly balanced cigar for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, anytime you introduce a new blend into a fairly established portfolio, which I tend to think of Avo as being, there's always some, just kind of like, okay, what is this adding? And I tell you, it wasn't so far off the radar, but it certainly added a really nice new expression of what Avo's portfolio offers, and definitely a cigar that got me excited over the last year or so.
All right. And with that out of the way, we're going to go to number 11. It is the La Madrina Shade Bellicoso from Dapper Cigar Company. This is Dapper, I believe, their second time on the list. And this is another one of the New Age Connecticut's. It's also similar to our number 13 cigar. It's another Bellicoso with a Connecticut shade wrapper on it. This time it comes from Nicaragua, from the Noxa factory. This was just a cigar that, I don't... It's number 11. It's an excellent cigar. It's probably not the most complex cigar on the list, but it's a cigar that seems really complete. I don't think there's a lot of ways that you could reasonably improve it. There's no obvious flaws, or even really, you really got to dig deep to find them. I thought the construction on this was fantastic, and it's a great cigar. It's a versatile cigar. You could smoke it at the end of the day. You could smoke it at the beginning of the day. I'm not a huge fan of the morning cigar, mild cigar with coffee pairing, like so many are, but this would be an ideal cigar, seemingly an ideal cigar if you're into that. But also a cigar that holds up at the end of the day. I think it's another excellent blend from Dapper. I haven't smoked any of the other Vitolas. I believe there are 4 of them. Brooks, your thoughts on this?
You nailed it, basically. I mean, everything I was going to say, you stole from me, so thank you.
That's not true.
But
you really like the band.
No, I was going to say, yeah, I love the art on this as well. The profile is nutty. It's creamy. It was complex. I think it was more complex to me than it was to you, perhaps. But I enjoyed that. I enjoyed it quite a bit. But the band on this, also the art on this is excellent, and it reminds me of one of those movies, those old movies that you see that have the same type of look to them. And I really, really enjoyed this. It's another one of those that you could smoke in the morning and do quite well with. So yeah, it's one of those you should go out and you get for sure if you haven't tried it. All right, so we are now past the top 15, the bottom 15, excuse me, going to the top 10.
First 15, bottom 15 sounds terrible.
Sorry, first 15. Going to the top 10 soon. Let me see. Question: how's your cigar going, Charlie?
It is. I am the we all smoke slow, I feel like, but I'm notorious for smoking slow. This one is burning super quick to the point where I've concerned I may not actually have a cigar left to smoke by the end of this.
I was very surprised how quick that seems to be going for you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I don't know why. I don't think it's
like
me.
a 4-hour smoke for you.
Normally. Thought I'd be smoking this on Sunday.
Put it out and pick it back up. What about you, Patrick?
Yeah, really, I'm very impressed with this Oliva Serie V 135th anniversary. A little bit quicker smoking time than I maybe thought, but really some interesting flavors. Right in the middle of sort of a creamy chocolate flavored that's sort of transitioning more into like a cocoa powder right now. Really
Yeah,
impressed.
those Oliva V's and chocolate, man. I mean, they've nailed that. Whatever they do to it, it just screams at it.
Yeah. How about yours?
Commenters, people watching, I'd love to see some predictions on number one if you guys want to.
We had those some
few.
earlier. Yeah,
I want more.
I know. We're not going to put them up on the screen, unfortunately, because then it may become obvious as to if somebody guesses the number one and whatnot. But yeah, that is it's interesting. Every year we do these lists. They're a little bit different in terms of what makes it. I think that these, certainly the 11 through 15 on my end, I think are excellent cigars. I haven't done the analysis to figure out where they would have ranked in previous years, but looking at over some of those cigars, I mean, some of my favorites of some of my top 10 favorites of the year are in there.
Yep.
Which happens most years on the list. Are we internally, guys? We good to go to the top 10, or are we gonna try to make this go out for 3 hours?
Oh, I think 3 hours would be great.
I mean, we can go back to our pre-show conversation about vacuum cleaners if you'd like. And
yeah, if anyone has any questions about vacuums,
Charlie knows quite a bit about vacuum cleaners, and he would be more than willing to answer any questions you have.
Unless they come from Brooks, in which case I'm probably not going to do it. All right, who do I need to remove? Who's not? Brooks, you're not partaking in the number 10 cigar?
I am not.
Okay, so I'm going to get rid of Brooks's face, and we're going to go on to number 10, which is the Cavalier. We didn't figure out whether or not we're supposed to say Geneva or Geneve, limited edition 2020. This is the first time Cavalier's actually on the list. I keep screwing this up because in the 2018 limited edition, Patrick gave a redux to it, and it got a massive score, 94, if I'm not mistaken, 95, something like that.
94, 95, yeah. I thought it was 95, maybe.
I think it was a 95, a score that we rarely give out. I mean, for some context, we didn't give a score above 92 last year. Anyway, so that's confusing to me. Also confusing, they don't disclose the blend here. It is obviously a barber pole. As you can see, there's two wrappers, or two different types of wrappers being used there. There is the signature 24 karat gold underneath the band. And this is an excellent cigar. I was a little bit curious because the first two limited editions, the 2018 and 2019, appeared to be the same blend, but it appeared they just basically took the cigar and box pressed one of them and made the other one round. So I thought that's what would happen for the 2020 and 2021 pairing. And then the 2021 cigar is a completely different size. And maybe not a barber pole. I can't remember off the top of my head. Sebastian, I believe, is in the comments, so he can correct all of this and maybe disclose the blend now that it's a top 10 cigar.
And how to say it.
Yeah, and how to say Geneva or Geneve. Patrick, I'm curious. I think this cigar, certainly score-wise, but I think personally this cigar was better than that 2018 one out of the gate. And then obviously a year later you smoked the 2018 one and it had transformed into something different. Your thoughts on where the 2020 sort of initially stands compared to the 2018 one that you love so much?
Well, it was funny. I went back and looked at your review of it in the last couple of days, and it was something that you had said in your notes about, and I want to read this because you said it's not a cigar I'd recommend pairing with any drink. It's not one I'd recommend smoking around a group of people. This is one of those times to go smoke a cigar in as much isolation as you can afford. Truly on brand for the year it's named after. So first off, that made me laugh because 2020, right? But then also really that resonated with me because, look, cigars are part of a social experience and for very good reason. But sometimes smoking them by yourself with a focused mind and palate are an even better experience. And that's something that I've certainly become more aware of in the decade or so of being part of Half-Wheel, and certainly with the pandemic and whatnot. But I think it's really also particularly applicable here. You called this an umami bomb, and I think that is actually a pretty apt description, especially since there was a good size list of flavors that led to that assessment or complemented it. And truthfully, we don't have enough time to go through all of those that you brought up. And I still remember when and where I was at when I first got introduced to this line. I've been really impressed with them ever since. I certainly have nothing but good thoughts about this. I think it definitely is at a better starting point than the 2018. Whether or not that's going to translate into aging better, Who knows? Time will tell. But I'm certainly excited to find out. And again, if you haven't gotten the chance to smoke either this cigar in particular or the Cavalier Geneva line in general, this might be a good time to start doing it, because I do think they were doing some pretty interesting things with their tobacco and their cigars. So with that, I think it's time to move on to number 9. And number 9 is actually named Epic 10. It's a celebration of Dean Parsons' Epic Cigars brand. It's the 10th anniversary. And what really got my attention about this one, it's a Cameroon wrapper paired with a Nicaraguan binder and filler made by AJ Fernandez. And this is very much in line with what has been sort of a slow trickle of this Cameroon and Nicaraguan blend trend that we started to see a little bit. We haven't seen it a lot for various reasons. I think largely limited access to the limited amount of tobacco, of Cameroon tobacco that's out there in the first place. And, maybe that led to some connotations that the two simply didn't work well together. I don't know if that's true or not, but I know one thing, it's certainly not the case. This isn't simply just a different expression. This is really showing that you can take a tobacco, pair it with other things, and get really impressive results. It's a stronger profile that most Dominican-based Cameroon blends tend to have. But interestingly, that didn't cost the Cameroon wrapper its role in the profile. You have red chili pepper segueing into black earthy pepper. The bright citrus sweetness tends to work with a chocolate flavor that exists in there. And, Charlie, you and I have talked about Cameroon a lot in various conversations. And in particular, this recent move towards Nicaraguan manufacturers using it. But I want you to talk about that, but also just give me your thoughts on the Epic 10.
Yeah, it's an excellent cigar. This was one of the first scores, I believe, that got to the 91 plus threshold in early 2021, because it was a pretty early release. And Epic's a brand that I've been familiar with. I met Dean many years ago. And this is certainly far and away the best Epic cigar I've smoked. I wouldn't claim to be an expert on the entire Epic portfolio, but this was, I read your review, I edited the review, and I was like, oh, I guess we're going to be smoking some more of these. And I think I've actually smoked a couple more of them, one for the top 25, and went back and smoked another one, which is a really good indication of how good this cigar is, given our sort of smoking schedule to keep up with the reviews. I would also point out this does not taste like an AJ Fernandez cigar. There's a profile that AJ, I think, really leans into heavily. I didn't find it to be that evident here. I don't know how much that was due to the Cameroon wrapper. And like you said, the Cameroon, I think that it was not the case that Cameroon wasn't being used in Nicaraguan factories because they didn't think it would work. I think most of it was due to the fact that the Mirafels, who control so much of the Cameroon wrapper supply, they weren't really looking for new clients. They had their core clients with Altadas, General, Fuente, La Aurora, and a couple of others, and they have since really, it seems like, tried to branch out and try to offer that Cameroon to other people. RoMa Craft's using it with Baca. You've seen Blackworks and Black Label Trading Company use it on a couple of their releases that have scored really well on Half-Wheel, and then obviously, some of it apparently got into AJ Fernandez's hands for this release, and I'm all for it. I think that there's something to be said about having we've talked about the Honduran Puros a lot already. There's something to be said about really leaning into a specific tobacco and even maybe a single farm vintage, like so many companies have tried to do over the years. But also, I enjoy cocktails. Like I enjoy bourbon neat, and I enjoy cocktails. And so let's experiment. Let's see how much, the different types of profiles we can bring out. And I'm hoping that we see more and more manufacturers. Obviously, Oliva is another one that's been using Cameroon for a while, although I'm not 100% sure where that Cameroon comes from. But we'll figure that out at a later date, I suppose, because I think it's probably time to move on to number 8.
Yes, number 8. And the number 8 cigar is the Alec and Bradley Kintsugi Corona Gorda. Now, I am really embarrassed to say this, but very, very early on in my smoking life, I thought that, for the longest time, I thought that Alec Bradley was the name of a person who actually owned a company called Alec Bradley. Obviously, it's not. Obviously, the owner is Alan Rubin. But his sons are actually named Alec and Bradley. That's who he named the company after. His sons are now working as in the company with him, and they started a sub-brand, if you will, called Alec and Bradley. Their first release in 2018. They had another release after that, but the third release was this Kintsugi. And this is a Honduran wrapper with Nicaraguan and Honduran in the filler and binder. And I got to tell you something. When I smoked this, it blew me away. And this is my review. And again, this is Honduran. Honduran to me, Honduran done correctly. However, whatever they did to this cigar and this Honduran wrapper and the filler it was amazing. The richness that I find with the really well done Honduran tobacco came forth in this really, really nicely. Very distinct flavors on this cigar in this Vitola. And it's just I smoked this and I was like, holy, I need to get more of these for sure. Although I didn't buy them, I think I grabbed one from here. But regardless, it was excellent, and it surprised me to the point where I was like, I hadn't heard much about this sub brand until this cigar, and I think a lot of people who smoke it probably will be very surprised if they give it a chance.
Yeah, we did a walkthrough of this, I'll be quite honest, yesterday, so to make sure that the technical issues or try to stamp out as many of them as possible. And I was like, there was a couple moments yesterday I was like, man, this cigar and where it places really shows you how good the rest of this list is. This is one of them. I remember smoking this for, scoring it for the top 25 and being like, this is easily a cigar that could be cigar of the year. I mean, it's as good as some of the previous winners, and it's excellent. It's one of the things that Brooks didn't mention, although it's in the write-up, is that this cigar was supposed to come out in 2020. They announced 3 sizes, and the Corona Gorda size wasn't one of them. And when it finally shipped in 2021, they added this size to ship with the other 3. And I haven't smoked all the rest of them, but I'm very thankful they did. It's an excellent cigar, and I also love the name. It refers to this art form in Japan of taking broken pottery and filling it in with gold. They also do a similar thing with silver as well, and you can kind of see that on the bands, and it's a lot more evident on the boxes as well. And I'm going to add Patrick back here because I think he needs to be here for the next one. But are we ready to go on to number 7, Brooks?
Yes, number 7 is the Davidoff Winston Churchill Limited Edition 2021. Now, this was obviously named after the British diplomat who loved cigars, and Prime Minister who loved cigars. And the everything that they did with this release, has to do with Winston Churchill when they relaunched it. It was, it has to do with Winston Churchill as the person. And one of the things is that this box, for example, was made to look like a chessboard. And I found this cigar to be just. It's definitely one of the best Winston Churchills I've smoked. I really enjoyed the Churchill Vitola from the original relaunch line. But this one is definitely, to me, a more complex version of what they can do with that blend. And it's really, really amazing. It was a very good cigar, obviously, with number 7. But great construction, great flavors, and I love the sweetness on the finish, as well as a retrohale, and it was really, really nice. Patrick, what'd you think?
Yeah, as I was thinking about this cigar, it reminded me that Winston Churchill, that the relaunch line, is one that I have some really impressive and fond memories of, but for whatever reason, I don't smoke enough of them in my regular rotation. And I think Charlie alluded to this. We have, we're doing reviews all the time, so getting to just pluck a cigar and smoke and enjoy it doesn't happen that often. And then the limited edition comes out and reminds me of almost seemingly everything that I've been missing from what this blend has to offer. 2021, no different. It's rich, complex, really well balanced, full of complementary flavors. And I sort of equate it to when you get a really well mixed and well constructed cocktail that, you can taste individual things, but you also see where they're linked and why they're there. Just a really, really impressive cigar, in my opinion, and one that, I think, again, if you haven't smoked the Winston Churchill line, the late hour in particular is one that still really resonates highly with me. It's a great reminder to go out and try the regular stuff, because the limiteds are good. The regular core line is very good. Now, I think we all just are waiting to see what the 2022 edition is going to hold. But while we wait for that cigar, let's get to the number 6 spot. and that is the Oliva Serie V Melanio Maduro number 4, or numero quattro, depending on your preference. This is one of 3 Vitolas that were added in 2021. It was the shortest and thinnest of not just the new sizes, but of the entire Melanio Maduro line. And as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't take a big cigar to deliver a big experience. It's a 4 1/4 by 46 petite Corona. It may look diminutive, but it is certainly big on flavor. Again, the blend swaps out the Ecuadorian Sumatra of the original Melanio for a Mexican San Andreas leaf, keeps the binder and filler from Jalapa, Nicaragua. And I think it's fair to say that this probably isn't the most complex profile you're going to find in a humidor. And this may not even be really the best size in the entire line, though I'd love to smoke all 7 Vitolas now to see if I still hold that view. But, you know, this cigar, when smoked, even when it's not maybe at its best, it does still offer a lot of earthiness, pepper, touches of sweetness, and all of its supporting flavors are really enjoyable. You know, Charlie, this is your review. I want you to go into the specifics on this. But one thing you mentioned to me was how alive and vibrant you thought that the profile was. I found the same sort of experience. And when somebody says that about a cigar as a descriptor, it's not a term we always use, but when it does, it's one that almost immediately gets my attention.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably if that was the ranking amongst the 25 cigars that are on this list, it would be the most sort of alive and vibrant of the bunch. Maybe not necessarily the best, although number 6 is no slouch, and I thoroughly enjoyed smoking these cigars. I do think, I'm not sure I've smoked all of the Melanio Maduro Vitolas, but I do think this is my favorite, at least, I mean, of the bunch that I've smoked. You know, most of the if I had to compare the Melanio to the Melanio Maduro in Vitola by Vitola, you know, I'd rather have the Melanio Figurado over the Maduro Figurado. I'd rather have the Melanio Torpedo, the Box Press Bellicoso, over the accompanying Maduro version. This is the one where that might be an exception. It was just an upbeat, you know, sort of, you know, just throwing flavors at you. And, you know, despite its really small size, you know, sort of similar to that Asylum, it just packed a ton of flavor. We've had a lot of Petit Coronas that have been able to deliver on that you know, profile of where, you know, the size doesn't really tell the full story. You know, I think back to some of the best stuff from Blackwork Studio, the Gabawan WCD release. Those are cigars that, you know, they're short, but there are very, very few cigars, even in our office, that have as much flavor. And this is a similar story where it's small, but excellent. You know, it's nice to see Oliva release new cigars. They don't do a ton of that, despite the size of the company that they are, and obviously they've placed 2 on this list so far. So congrats to them. I'm going to put Brooks back over here, and this is the first 20. Brooks, did you have something to say about that?
No, I didn't know.
Okay. So this is 20 out of the 25. We're getting down to the last 5. We're going to take a little bit of a break here so you guys can see where we're at. Patrick, how is your Oliva Serie V, not Melanio, but the regular Serie V 135th going?
Still very good. Really impressed. I mean, I've got just about that much left, and it's holding on, hopefully all the way to the very end. I mean, I might be smoking the cap of this thing by the time we're done.
Interestingly, despite our really slow smoking times, all 3 of us may not have a cigar left by the end of this at the rate that we're going. Brooks, your Year of the Rat is getting down to the final
Indeed
inch
it is.
there. How is that going?
It's really, I actually quite enjoyed it. Earthy with a really distinct red pepper on the finish. I'm enjoying the heck out of this.
And for those wondering about epically slow smoke times, I am, for some reason, just powering through this apparently. It's quite good. It's definitely, I think I enjoyed the cigar when it was fresher. This is the SBC 18 from Palstani, but still a very good cigar, though. You can tell it's definitely aged out a bit. So we're going to let you guys get your predictions in for the top cigar, the top 5, although not too fast or not too slow, because Brooks is about to mispronounce our number 5 cigar.
No, he has no
Should I have faith
in me. All right, here we go.
I
So
have
the number.
faith in you, Brooks.
Thanks, Patrick. Appreciate
That's
that.
only because Patrick has to say the word too.
And I sent you a tutorial.
Patrick
on this.
sent me a link to tell me how to say this. This is the Kidose Baalbek Edition Regional Libano. This is the number 5 cigar. This is only one of 2 Kidose regional editions that have been made for a country other than France. The first one was in 2011. And this is actually named after a historical city in Lebanon, which has been continuously occupied for 8,000 and 9,000 years. The interesting thing about this cigar is that it was actually put on the 2018 release list for Habanos, but was not announced until 2019 and did not actually ship until 2021. Also, it's the first Quai d'Orsay to be sold in 50-count cabinets, which is very interesting because they're not really all that popular anymore in terms of the smoking public. So what I found about this was it was one of the most approachable newer Cubans that I have smoked in a very, very long time. A lot of these regionals, they sometimes young, sometimes they need a little bit of time, sometimes they're just not that good. But this one is definitely the outlier. It is an excellent cigar. I found some really great citrus peel on the finish for this cigar that I just loved, and I was really impressed with this. Certainly not a marca that I usually just pull out of a humidor and smoke. But it was really, really excellent. Patrick, what do you think?
Yeah, one of the things I loved about this cigar was that when the first puffs of it were right, and they generally were, it really was the perfect introduction to the rest of the cigar. And I mention that because there are so many cigars where the start is either disjointed, out of balance, maybe you get a little aggressive with the lighter and you char the foot, or it's just not in line with where the cigar is planning to go. This also had a surprising amount of nicotine to me, which this is something you might not think of from the market, given its lineage and association with French food and drink, whatever that may mean to you. I'd also say that I never thought I would describe this blend in particular as having flavors that reminded me of a peppery, slightly charred steak crust, but it did, and it worked. You said, Brooks, Edition Regionales don't always get it right, but in this case, it really did. And whether or not you want to put in the time or the effort and the money to get this particular cigar, that's up to you. But I will say that if you're into Cuban cigars like this one are a very enjoyable treat, but also, as I've said earlier, a good reminder of, or a good introduction to a Marcus core line, which in the case of the Quai d'Orsay, I've really come to enjoy since the refresh and the relaunch a few years ago. And if nothing less, it has certainly sparked many a conversation over how to properly say the name. And I have heard it from French people said different ways, certainly non-French people of many pronunciations. However you say it, it's a good cigar.
Well, I tell you this, I can now say Quai d'Orsay.
You're never going to forget that, are you?
Fairly well.
We're still not sure if that's the correct pronunciation. But the good news is,
I'm going to say it faster. Maybe that'll help.
Probably
I'll
not.
say this. At least he's committed to it. And that's, and when you like, I do a lot of announcing, as people know, so I say a lot of names that I'm not always 100% sure of. If you're not right, at least be certain of it. And you've certainly, I think, improved
at least
in 24 hours. Your certainty and your commitment to Quai d'Orsay.
Thanks.
All right. Well, with these mispronunciations out of the way, let's go to number 4.
Let's go to the number 4, which is Hoyo de
Oh boy.
Sorry. The number 4 is Hoyo de Nicaragua Dos Cientos. This was a cigar released for the to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua declaring their independence from the Spanish Empire. Long time ago. This, Hoyo de Nicaragua was not exactly, new to our list by any means, but this was actually really interesting in that the packaging, actually, they included one cigar in paper to smoke on the actual anniversary inside of the box. And I found that, very, very interesting. But more than that, I found it to be an extremely, extremely good cigar. This was, I'm not very surprised when I love a Hoyo de Nicaragua these days, but this one had something special. It was just so well made and had the flavors that I really enjoy out of a cigar. That richness and complexity and balance. It nailed everything all at once, and it was just excellent. Charlie, what did you think?
Yeah, this is Hoyo de Nicaragua has been doing really well on our list for the last 5 years, and this is yet another one. I'm so glad that they have decided to really spend time getting into that medium full portfolio as opposed to just the Antaños that they were known for so long. Because when they do this, they make some excellent cigars. They tend to be a little pricey and oftentimes limited, but this was fantastic. I also didn't make our packaging top 10 yesterday, but as someone that's been playing around with fonts and colors and space issues, at least trying to, I thought they really nailed the packaging here. It ties in with the theme, and that special cigar they paired or was made to go with an event that they were going to do virtually on the date of the Independence. It got delayed because COVID. But another excellent release from Hoyo, and no surprise to see it here in our top 5.
All right, and with that, we move on to number 3. Number 3 marks the return of one of the more storied creations in Tatuaje's history, a cigar that dates back to 2005, and a release for Our Field Wine Company in Hawaii, but it's not the same cigar. It's actually a different wrapper, the Tatuaje T110 Capa Especial. Now, I'll save you the full details of the T110's history. It's well documented on the site. But in March 2021, Pete Johnson announced that the T110 was not only coming back, not just a few months later, he announced it would be getting 2 new wrapper options. The Reserva, which is a Connecticut broadleaf wrapper, and this cigar, the Capa Especial, which uses an Ecuadorian Sumatra wrapper, while the original used an Ecuadorian Habano wrapper. And we were certainly interested to smoke these new varietals, and as you can probably infer from the number 3 position, the results with the Capa Especial were quite good. The T110 is a strong blend, make no mistake about it. Its legend probably got a bit exaggerated over the years, as things happen to or tend to do in those cases. Most notably claims it's an all Ligero cigar. I've been told by Pete Johnson that is not true, though it does use some high priming Visos as well as Ligeros. But the real question as to this cigar was what the wrapper would do to the blend. Would it enhance it? Maybe not enhance it? Well, as Charlie found out in his review, I think that I found in smoking this cigar, and Brooks, I'm sure you would concur with this, the Sumatra wrapper seemed to soften the blend just a touch, but also really enhance the complexity of the cigar. We talked earlier about how strong cigars sometimes struggle with complexity. That was certainly not the case here. It seemed the wrapper not only contributed to that goal, but it may have even opened the door for the rest of the blend to show more of what it has to offer. Brooks, I'm really intrigued to hear your thoughts on the Tatuaje T110 Capa Especial.
I am a avid supporter and lover of the Sumatra wrapper that Pete uses for the Capa Especial blends. The Karloff, of course, got number 1 last year. Uses this same not maybe the same wrapper, but the same Sumatra wrapper, and there's a reason for it. It just makes, as far as I'm concerned, it makes just about everything that he puts out better. I was concerned about the T110, however, before I smoked it, because having smoked the T110 when it was released originally, it was a very strong cigar, and I was afraid that the Sumatra wrapper and the strength of the T110 blend would really clash to the point where it just would be very noticeable and not necessarily very good or balanced. But that did not seem to be the case. It really put something else. It took some stuff away. It took away some of the strength for one thing, but it added that, it added a nice richness and a really great different profile to the T110 blend that I loved. I'm really glad we bought a box of these because I'm going to be smoking the hell out of them for sure.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you.
All right. I think we're ready to go to number 2. I mentioned this with the Alec and Bradley release at number 8, was that? There was another moment on this list where I was like, man, this really says just how good these cigars are. And I think that number 2 says a lot about how good number 1 is. It is the OpusX Forbidden X 13 Deseos de Amor, which translates to love wishes or wishes of love. This is an excellent cigar. I think, I mentioned earlier, we don't rank the cigars. We score them individually, and then we see what the combined scores are. I'm guessing if I had to rank them based off of like what I would think we would say collectively, I would have probably picked this. Certainly this or the T110 would have been in the guess for number 1. I was the one that was fortunate enough to do this review. It was an excellent cigar. I think, in the minority amongst the staff amongst liking fresh Opus. There really is not fresh Opus, but because they age them for a year at the factory. But I smoke OpusX fresh, whereas Brooks in particular likes to have them with age. And one of the best parts with this cigar, if you could ever get it and not have to pay 3 times MSRP for it, is that it tastes to me like a 3 or 4 year old OpusX. It still has the sweetness, that underlying sweetness and cedar that I tend to find is a very live cedar flavor, and then the power, that's sort of the trio of combination that's the signature of OpusX for me. It had that, but a little bit milder, and it allowed some of the other flavors to break through. Brooks, where would you do you think this is similar to that aged OpusX comparison, or do you think it's a completely different thing altogether?
No, you nailed it for sure. This is what I loved about the cigar and why I rated it so highly, is that I typically if I'm not reviewing, I'm not going to smoke a OpusX fresh for the most part. I find them to be a little bit too aggressive for my tastes. But I usually try to age them, and I don't have many of them, but I've got some aged 3 years, 5 years, and I usually like them right around that 3 to 4 year mark. And this is, to me, exactly what you said. It tastes like a 3 or 4 year aged Opus to me, OpusX to me. You can take it out of the box and you can smoke it and feel like that the strength is tamed down a little bit, and the flavors, it allows the flavors to come through quite a bit more than a fresh one. I was extremely impressed with this, and I wish we had more of them, because it's definitely one of those that you pick up and go, wow, this is just an amazing cigar for sure.
Patrick, I'm curious to know your thoughts on, is this more like a aged OpusX or something completely different?
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with you. I go back and forth on the fresh, the right off the shelf Opus discussion. It's weird because I'll go back and try one, and that one will go, oh no, these need some time, and then I'll pick up another one at some point and go, oh yeah, that's actually really enjoyable. It definitely is a mellower expression of the OpusX band, however you want to call that. In thinking about this, I still think the OpusX Oscuro is one of my favorite, OpusX releases. Certainly, Angel Share is right up there with it. And my opinion on it sort of goes back and forth, just depending on maybe the last one I smoked. But you're definitely right in that if I was to walk into a cigar shop and pick one up, I'd have no qualms about smoking it right away, or even putting it in the humidor for a few more years just to see what it may do with a little bit more time. Definitely it's not the most available cigar in the world, as we've alluded to, but it's
not even
one of
close.
the more accessible in terms of the OpusX portfolio.
Yeah, and I was curious, because we score them and we don't rank them, we can go back and compare them. And I was not surprised to learn that this scored higher than our previous 2 number ones in the past year. And I think that's a great segue into just how good the number 1 cigar of the year was this year. It was close between this and the OpusX. They were not separated by very much at all, certainly down to, I think, 100th of a point. But our number 1 cigar of the year, I forget if these are all automated, I guess they are not, is the My Father Humidor Deluxe, which is an even more difficult cigar to find, keeping with a long-standing half-wheel tradition of naming cigar of the year to things that are very difficult to find. And I mentioned it in my review that it was a shame, to some degree, about how these cigars were sold. Many of you are probably, I don't think anyone guessed this, which is also a rare instance for us. But this was a cigar that was sold in Ellie Blue humidors that my father had made to celebrate the 70th birthday of Jose Pepin Garcia, which is the family's patriarch, and whose name graces so many of the cigars my father sells. They made 75 humidors. They kept 5 of them. They shipped 70 to stores. They had 100 cigars, 100 of these special cigars inside of them, and the total price was $10,000. They also asked the retailers that got these humidors to not split them up. At least that's what we understand. Fortunately, one of the retailers didn't adhere to that, and there was a brief moment where you could purchase these, or where we were able to purchase 8 or 9 of them. And I'm very thankful that we did, because it is an excellent cigar. It is, it was very close between this and the OpusX when you look at the scores, but I think they're very similar in the sense that this is a complete cigar. It's very, very tough outside of a few construction, minor burn issues to find any fault with this. And one of my favorite parts about this cigar is that there wasn't some sort of lengthy backstory. This wasn't, my father didn't say, oh, this was the first cigars we rolled at the factory, or these were the first tobaccos we grew at our farms, or these were a farm that we only could grow for 1 year at. They just said it's a Nicaraguan Puro, tobaccos from our farm, 6.5 by 52, Toro extra size, which is the size they've used for so many limited editions in the My Father and the Jaime Garcia brand over the years. And it was just excellent. It's another interesting thing to think back about because the review happened in March, which meant that most of us were smoking these cigars in March and in April. And because of how limited they were and how expensive they were and how difficult they were to get, I don't think any of us have really smoked one in the last 6 months. And yet that score stood sort of the test of 2021, I suppose, as far as half wheel is concerned. And it is an absolutely excellent cigar. Patrick, your thoughts on the number one cigar of the year?
Yeah, I first and foremost, certainly, I wish there were more of them, and I certainly empathize with people who may have not gotten the chance to smoke this. But this is a cigar for me that is a really good example of what happens when I think there's a goal of just refining the flavor, and in this case, ending up with truly fantastic results. I can tell you what I remember from the cigar flavor-wise, but without having somebody experience it, what makes it special part just doesn't really translate. And I think even then you have to have some experience with cigars on the whole to understand what this particular cigar is about versus the field, and that's what makes it special. I'm wanting to draw analogies to how certain cars handle when you drive them, or the tailoring or hand feel of certain clothing and fabrics. It certainly checks the box of being a cigar to smoke, but then it goes so far above and beyond that. And, yes, this is a Nicaraguan Puro with a Corojo wrapper, but that doesn't even begin to tell the story of what the cigar offers once you actually get a chance to smoke it. It's beyond just complex and balanced. It's one of almost no wasted energy. It's graceful. Its transitions are purposeful. It's layered. It's dynamic without being brash. And as I think you noted in your review, Charlie, it's a cigar that doesn't have the pepin edge, but it also doesn't need it. This is a cigar that just does what it's going to do, and seemingly the result of just, a concerted, focused effort to reach a new pinnacle in cigar making. So we'll do the congratulations in a minute, but congratulations to my father and Jaime and Yanni and Don Pepin Garcia. This cigar is a testament to how the company has grown and how it's grown, through his work and through his kids' work. And particularly, I think, too, as we've seen the company become more invested in tobacco, both in growing it, acquiring it, storing it, processing it. It really is a testament to them. Now we just
Patrick,
find
I'm
ways
curious.
to get more on the market,
Apparently our comment section is a great way to do that. But I'm curious to know, is there a cigar that this reminds you of, whether it's from My Father or elsewhere? Because I have spent quite a bit of time, and I can't think of another cigar that this reminds me of.
As a one-to-one comparison, not really. It certainly has, it's, when you look at it from a flavor note standpoint, I could probably make a comparison to a lot of things. But again, like in terms of what the total package and the total experience is, no, it doesn't really have a lot of equals in my assessment of it.
Brooks, did this remind you of anything, or are we just
no? And
here?
I think that's probably one of the beauties about it is that this cigar was the total package. It had everything going for it, and I hate the fact that so many of our number ones seem to be cigars that it's very difficult to find, or you can't really get, or they're expensive, or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, we're rating the top cigar that we reviewed, and this was a clear winner for a reason. It is that good, and it is easily, it may not be the best for all of us, but it's easily one of the best for all of us, one of the top three easily for all of us. And there's a reason that
certainly for Brian Burt.
Yes, and Brian scored this very, very, Very high.
Apparently one of the best cigars Brian Burt's ever smoked in his life. But all three of us, it was close between this and the OpusX. Statistically, it was pretty close. But if you're going to get number one on our list, you got to be a very, very, very good cigar. And this was a special one. I'm going to put up the full list, I think. There it is. We're going to maybe take some questions. This has gone on longer than I think we had planned. But we will maybe. I certainly want to address that comment about the limited stuff at the end. But here's the list. Patrick, real quick, anything that stands out to you? Any surprises about where things ended up, positively or negatively? I mean, obviously it's all positive. It's the top 25 list, but
Yeah, I can't. I don't think this was a year where there was something that I may have scored particularly high that didn't resonate with the rest of the team. I could sit and nitpick and flip flop one here or there, but no, I mean, the grand scheme of things, I think this is a pretty accurate and reflective list of some really good cigars in 2021. And if you put all these on a table in front of me and said pick the first one, number one, I don't think you could go wrong with any of them. And yeah, I can't say anything really stands out in that regard.
All right, Brooks, any surprises here for you?
Yes, actually, the Aladino Cameroon Elegante, I thought was going to score quite a bit higher. I mean, I loved the hell out of that, and it was an amazing cigar for me, and I really, really thought that it would get a little bit higher, at least in the top 10. And I was surprised when it didn't. It's definitely something that the people should try if they haven't already. It's really, really great.
All right. So there's this comment from Casey. I want to address this because, I think it's important. We don't make any attempt to try to sort of sanitize this list or manipulate it so that every manufacturer gets one cigar. Certainly, we publish our list of advertisers. You can go look at it. I haven't done the math yet, but I'm guessing that the majority of the list is not from advertisers. I mean, it seems pretty clear looking at it. And a lot of our advertisers don't make the list. We don't limit the amount of cigars that a company can have on here. Obviously, I'll get to in a second. There are 3 companies that have multiple cigars. We don't factor price into scores, and we also don't, just because this cigar was super limited doesn't mean that we're going to restrict it. I mean, it wasn't that small of a release. It was 7,000 cigars went out to retail. We've certainly given number one cigar of the year to cigars that are even more difficult to get. And there's other people's lists who have, cigars that are tougher to get. But we take, I think, what's probably the cleanest approach here, which is we're just going to try to give you the best 25 cigars that we smoked in our full review process. And it just so happens consistently that a lot of the times the cigars are difficult to get. Although, the most difficult to get one was a few years ago in the Hoyo de Nicaragua, numero uno at the time. It was, an event-only cigar. And then Hoyo de Nicaragua, fortunately, decided to make it a whole line. And there have been 3 Vitolas now since. So maybe my father will make these a little bit more available. It certainly would be nice for Brian Burt and for many of our readers. And on that note, we're going to kind of do the last bit. You want to recognize there are 3 companies on here that had multiple cigars in the list. Davidoff had 3, and Habanos Eseada and Oliva both had 2. So congratulations to them. Anytime you can put multiple cigars anytime you can put a cigar on our list, I think it's cause for celebration. Hopefully it is. But certainly multiple cigars, is an accomplishment and something we want to recognize. And similarly, there were 3 factories that had multiple cigars on the top 25. My father had 3, and then Cigars Davidoff, which is the Davidoff factory that makes Davidoff, had 2, and then the Oliva factory, or maybe factories, the 2 factories, honestly, they don't really tell you which cigars are made where, had 2 cigars as well. And so it's, I think, worthwhile to point that out. If you're wondering by country, Cuba had 2, the Dominican Republic had 5, Honduras had 5, which is a big uptick from the year before. Nicaragua had 12, and the La Palina goalie was rolled at Altiten de Bronze in Miami, which is the lone representative from the U.S. this year. So, any final thoughts, Patrick, before we sign off?
No, I mean, look, I think if anything, when you look back over the last couple of years and concerns that were facing the industry when it came to regulation and stifling the production of new cigars and things like that, and maybe some concerns that it was going to get boring. I think this list shows that that's absolutely not the case. There are a lot of great cigars in this list, and look, there are some exclusive high dollar cigars on here, but there's also a lot of really fairly readily available and fairly affordable cigars on here as well too. Like I say, you can go to that $6 20-minute toms from Asylum. That's seemingly readily available. The Oliva Milano Maduro number 4, probably go down and find that at a number of cigar shops. And I also think too, it was a nice balance of cigars from big, very huge portfolio companies. General and Altadas both had cigars on here.
Habanos
had cigars on here. Davidoff had cigars on here. But then you look at like Epic 10, Dean Parsons, and yes, the company was sold to Xander Gregg, but I mean, I wouldn't consider him a huge operation by any sense of the imagination. You have La Madrina and Dapper Cigar, second time on the list, in at number 11. This is a guy that's based in Fresno, California, and certainly using a well-known factory with Noxa, but it's maybe not the, with no disrespect to Noxa, it's not the powerhouse big name factory that people I think maybe have a strong association with. I don't want the list to become diminished or just not held in its entirety because of what was at the top and scattered throughout. I mean, I think this is a really impressive showing that a lot of people can find their way onto this list, and a great reminder that there's a lot of cigars that are out there that are very enjoyable. I mean, that St. Louis Rey Carenas Toro. I don't know probably how many people have maybe walked by that cigar in a humidor somewhere and just went, oh, it's a St. Louis Rey or whatever. I don't know anything about it. And yet, like, as we both talked to, that's a very impressive cigar. So yeah, I think it's, looking at the list in its entirety, from top to bottom, I at least get a really good feeling for where the cigar industry is. And I continue to maintain that we are living in a very good time for cigar smokers in terms of the quantity or the quality of product that is out and available, probably sitting at your local brick and mortar retailer or readily available to have shipped to you within a couple of days.
All right, Brooks, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I was I was really surprised when I saw the final list, because as you mentioned, we don't see the final list until very, very close to when we actually go on the air. And I was very surprised at the number of Honduran blends that were on the list, and I'm really interested to see if that continues for next year. If it'll be more of that, or if it's just a flash in the pan. So
yeah. It'll certainly be curious. So I'd like to thank Brooks and Patrick, as well as Brian Burt, who has been in the comments section and is looking for My Father Humidor Deluxes. So just DM him apparently. But I'd like to thank all of them, as well as Matt Davis and the team at Bistro Studios. We've worked really hard over the last year. We were not happy with the quality of the presentation in a number of different ways, not necessarily this one, although I think it's been improved. But I'm really excited for you guys to see what the text form of this list looks like. We've spent a lot of time trying to make it look a lot more half-wheel like than the previous ones did, and it will be up on the site shortly. The only thing that's holding it back is literally this presentation. So I'm going to wrap it up, but I thank everyone that's been involved. There's been a lot of people in a lot of different places for making this. This is oddly, unfortunately for me, not the last of this awards week. The annual tradition hosted by Half-Wheel, the Consensus, which is not Half-Wheel's list. It's not my list. It's just something, it's a project that we did. The basics of it are, imagine a world where you had someone that never smoked a cigar but had apparently just a ton of time to read and watch and listen to all the various top 10, top 25 lists from magazines, blogs, podcasts, YouTubers, etc. Imagine if you had that person in this imaginary world and they just consumed all of these lists. And then you ask them some questions. What would they say? What would they say the number one cigar of the year was based off of all these different sources? What would they say the trends were, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? That is the Consensus. it is a complete pain in my ass, if I'm being quite frank with you. But it is a pain in the ass that many of you do enjoy. And I will be back on Monday, same time and place, to unveil the consensus live for you guys. So with that said, I thank all of you for participating in the chat. I hope that you've enjoyed listening to us for the last 2 hours. And if you haven't, I guess your Friday is just not going very well. But our Friday is congratulations to all of the winners, especially congratulations to my father for winning #1 cigar of the year from halfwheel.com. And I'll see you guys on Monday.